Welcome back to the Science Fictionary podcast. Only 5 minutes late, which is about usual. I guess I should just change the name of the podcast to 5 minutes late. But we're going to talk about the new Rings of Power trailer and some of the images that have come out, and just kind of our thoughts on what we think about it so far, where it's going, and what we expect when it actually releases. Thank you for joining me tonight. We've got DB from over at the Skate Pod joining us tonight.
How you doing?
And Charles from Conversations.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
And Adam from A Certain Point of View podcast.
Hey, good night, everyone.
And before we get started,
good night's a weird way to say hi, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So I kind of want to, before we get going, I want to let everybody talk a little bit about how they got into Lord of the Rings, like how deep they've, really dug into Lord of the Rings. Myself, I haven't read the entire histories of Middle Earth, but I've read a lot of it. The Silmarillion is like the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, and the Silmarillion are things that I read just periodically, repeatedly. I try to read the Lord of the Rings books every year. The Silmarillion doesn't come up quite that frequently, but I do enjoy diving into that. And I think the Silmarillion for me is one that, like, sometimes I go, I want to read this chapter, and I pick it up and I read that chapter, and then I put it back on the shelf. But I've been really, really big into it for a long time. So the movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, even the Hobbit movies. I mean, I was excited when they came out. They suffered heavily from studio intervention and mishandling. But I've been a big fan for a long time. But Charles, you're the only one I've kind of talked to the other. I mean, Adam came on and played Lord of the Rings trivia with us, so I know his lore is, his knowledge of the lore runs pretty deep. But
it's all right.
I mean, everybody was not sure how they would do in that trivia, but you kind of killed it in that trivia. So
I did okay.
Well, I mean, I
didn't make a total fool. So
we had a ringer. I didn't know we had a ringer in the room, but I think he only missed one question all night.
Yeah,
so.
Kev was pretty.
Yeah. It was because there were a couple. I was like, nobody will get this, and Kev just spits out the answer. It was like, what the heck, man?
Yeah.
But Charles, what about you?
Well, I grew up on Dungeons and Dragons, playing the tabletop game and role-playing game and dice and the whole bit. And so The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings was right in my wheelhouse for sure. So that was a natural progression for me. I had read Lord of the Rings and The Two Towers, and somehow omitted The Return of the King, but that coincides with my reading of The Wheel of Time. So that was obviously a thick series. And then I read Two Towers after, and I remember I was teaching actually continuing education, and one of my students who could sense I was a nerd, I don't know how that's possible, but anyways, he showed me one of the early released images of the Lord of the Rings, the production stills, and I'm assuming from one of the LordofTheRings.net or whatever, one of those grandfathered websites back then. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, just how awesome this was going to look. So those movies really were my reintroduction to my fandom of Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I didn't reread the books because I had read them and I was familiar enough with the story. I did pick up The Hobbit after that, read The Hobbit. I did pick up the Silmarillion, and it's still there. Haven't read it yet. I tried several times. But yeah, so I think that the books provided the foundation, and the trilogy really became my new canon, as it were, because they were so good.
Yeah.
And I watched The Hobbit, and I have my opinions about that, but as rarely as that watched. I watched the first movie, and there's great points of the entire trilogy of The Hobbit, but I can distinctly remember, following the production notes, very pointedly during that. And when I found out it went to 3 movies, I just could not believe it. It's like, what is going on with this story? So I went in there with a little bit of apprehension. But yeah, I would say that the movies have taken over more of my canon version of the story, with somewhat at the base of the actual written story.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people kind of fall in it that way. A lot of people were reintroduced to Tolkien through those movies or introduced to for the first time. People don't read like they used to. And so it's always interesting to talk to people that got into it that way because they have, it's a very different perspective than mine that I was read The Hobbit at 9 years old and, immediately followed by Lord of the Rings and read the Silmarillion by the time I was 12. So, I mean, getting it from people that started with the movies is very different or even started just with the books later in life.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that have never gotten into Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, do you like fantasy at all? Because if you like any modern fantasy, Lord of the Rings fingerprints are all over it.
Mm-hmm.
Like even our beloved Star Wars has Tolkien's fingerprints all over it. It's all there. I mean, it's the creation of modern fantasy writing, and everything after it has both had to try to live up to it and been affected by it. But Dragon Buddy, what about you?
I was 10 years old, and my dad gave me this book here, The Hobbit. It was a paperback that he read when he was younger, and said, "You need to read this. You'll fall in love with it. We need to talk about it, and I need to talk to somebody about it." And I read The Hobbit, and what a great story. And then he said we moved on to this trilogy box here of the Lord of the Rings, and that took me a little longer through. A lot of going back and forth. It was a heavy read. I think I was 11, but I just love the world building. I was so fascinated with the idea of someone being able to not only create an entire world, but languages and the flora and the fauna of a world, and to such a degree of accuracy, I guess you could say, that I was just amazed by it. And from there, it just kind of blossomed into, I ate everything. I got the Tolkien Reader. I have about 5 or 6 books that were from his original paper book collection. And then I've gone from there to the beasts of, to the science of all of Tolkien's, his world. And just been fascinated with, and I think like you said before, there's so much fantasy, that world building, just the act of building worlds comes from how Tolkien did it himself. I just couldn't get enough of it. And now we're coming on the show. I started reading through some of the things, watching over and over the teaser trailer to see what I could pull from it, and realized I have forgotten more than I could believe. And and started pulling all my books out and said, okay, we're going to get back into this. Been meaning to read more. I'm putting everything else down. I'm going to break out everything Tolkien I have and get back into remembering.
No, it's I mean, like I said, I've been diving into it deep for a long time, and it's fun. I mean, there's still, we got earlier, I guess last year we got the Nature of Middle Earth book, which is, it makes the Silmarillion seem like the most exciting book you've ever read.
Right.
But I learned real quick, like I picked it up and read it, but it's one of those things that was like, this wasn't meant to just be read. This was meant as a resource book. And for
Right.
that, it's incredible. Like the stuff that they went into in that book. But Adam, what about you?
Yeah, so I started Lord of the Rings with Fellowship of the Ring, the movie, when I was in high school, and that's kind of what introduced me to that world. And then from that point, it was like a deep dive. So I picked up the book, read through all 3 of the books. Then I started reading into Tolkien, like the man, and doing some reports on him and doing research on him, reading about his life, his beliefs, and all that stuff. And really, it just it it actually kind of ignited a passion in me for literature, for English, for languages and things like that as well. Just knowing his whole linguist background, all that stuff just really got me going into that. And that's, basically what I majored in after high school. So, it really started there. Like I said, I dove into Unfinished Tales and read The Hobbit, all this other stuff, and Silmarillion. But like DB said, just the world building around Middle Earth is unprecedented, and I don't think that will ever happen again. With basically one set of hands. I know that and I know that Christopher's helped a lot, but I mean, he's basically publishing his dad's stuff. So I mean, basically one set of hands puts this whole thing together. I don't think that'll ever happen again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is everybody's left now. Christopher and whoever. I don't even know who's in charge of handling that stuff now, but basically going through his notes and piecing together complete works from his notes. I mean, it's all there. And that's the thing about him. He was actually way more interested in creating the world than writing the books.
Yep.
And, and that's what you'll probably never find again, is someone who's just so interested in creating their world that the books are almost secondary. I mean, it's questionable whether he would have ever even finished the books if it wasn't for the publishers hounding him. It could have very easily ended up being Christopher that had to finish the trilogy and it took the publishers forever to get him to finish as it was.
So was he more about the history and the lore than the actual story itself?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is he was a historian and a linguist. And so he was very much about just creating this history, this made up. I mean, the thing is he created it out of an idea. Northern Europe, most of the ancient histories of Northern Europe, they're non-existent. They weren't the Celts, the Normans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings. They weren't record keepers. In fact, most of them didn't have writing. There's no writing until very late era, even almost till the Romans show up. So there's just not a ton of history. And so this was sort of him creating a stand-in ancient history for Northern Europe. And
the whole mythology.
So yeah,
and you see that in the world building too. I mean, you look at Middle Earth. I mean, it kind of looks like Europe, right? When you see it on a map, it has those, that kind of half curved shape that that Europe would have. But yeah, it's very, very interesting when you look at it as like an alternate history for that part of the world.
Yeah. All right, so I kind of want to get into, I guess, really the trailer. We had those poster images that came out. I just kind of want to get a general feel going around the room to kind of where everybody's at. Like, I mean, I've had real mixed expectations on this. There are things that make me nervous about it. There's things that do make me excited about it. I do think there were some good news things that came out of that Vanity Fair article. I don't know. I think my biggest concern is now we're learning that what they have access to as far as what they're allowed to pull from is not, in fact, the Silmarillion. That what they were given access to was the Lord of the Rings, the 3 books, plus the appendices. Right. So that in itself to me is probably my biggest concern, is like, that's all incomplete. Like, the Silmarillion would have helped fill in so many story points, and I actually don't even know how they only got access to those things. And it's going to be interesting with a lot of that. I mean, I just noticed the other day that about a week ago they announced that both the movie rights and the video game rights are all about to become available on the market. So,
I read New Lines disputing that pretty heavily.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind if they did. Like, I would love to see someone make a game, a big game set in Middle Earth, but
Gollum's not doing it for you.
But I would almost hate to see the movies remade. right now.
No.
I mean, they hold up so well, and
No, yeah.
and the thing about those movies is I think in most ways the Lord of the Rings films were very loyal to Tolkien's writings. They did add some things that were questionable, having the elves show up at Helm's Deep and things like that aren't in the book. But I think what they did masterfully was conveying what the story and the feeling behind the story that Tolkien told. I think that they stayed true to his view of this place.
I agree, and because of that, and because of how they're filmed, so so practically, those are timeless movies. We talk about movies that never need to be remade. Back to the Future is always one that kind of those rumors pop up around.
Yep.
This is even more timeless than Back to the Future. Like, these movies are aging really well. Just like I said a little bit ago, just the practicality of how they were shot. There's definitely CGI and green screening and all that stuff, but the use of the terrain in New Zealand, the use of that terrain in New Zealand, how, like you said, how it was balanced, those movies are going to age really well for a long time.
And the other thing I think about those movies as well is that even familiarity with the original books, there was story beats that obviously if you read the book, I mean, I had, re-explored the books after, but if you really follow along and like you guys do, you could probably pick out those pieces for sure. But as you're telling a story within 3 movies, which in itself, and especially the extended editions, let alone what was in theaters, you sort of, the story flowed so well that you sort of gave those misgivings sort of a pass because of the way the story progressed. And there's some big changes. I mean, my personal biggest egregious mistake was getting rid of Tom Bombadil. I loved his poetry and his singing, but anyway, that's but those things you sort of move through, and by the end of this, at the end of the movie, at the end of Return of the King, I mean, you, my friends, bow to no one. A bawling mess. I mean, it's so well done. The saturation of that story is in there, and all the characters developed sort of equally throughout those movies. Did it so successfully and had really the understanding of what the books were. The essence, I guess what I'm saying is the essence of the books was present 100%.
I agree.
Yes. It definitely held true to, I think, Tolkien's vision. I remember when they were coming out, I was upset. My dad passed before they came out. It was something that I think, it was something we bonded with. So it was always very special to me to have that bond over the story, these worlds. And so when the movies came out, it was to be able to watch through them, especially the extended versions, and feel like there was love for the subject matter put into the movies, that it wasn't, we'll pick all the best scenes that we can do and we can stuff it full of action, and they really held true to the underlying stories, the love stories that are there, the sadness of an age coming to an end, and a new age beginning. I think all of those were held true in through the movies, and that's what's going to keep them. They just came out with the 4K editions, and they're looking prettier now. It's and they really hold up. And I think that's where, coming into the Rings of Power, I remember hearing the exorbitant amount of money that they were spending on the rights and how they had to have put into production X amount and get it done. I was so excited. And I guess I have my reservations that I hope we're not just remaking the Lord of the Rings, because we're supposed to be before this. I mean, and I'm hoping we're not just falling back on the familiarity that people have of the older movies, and we're just remaking them into a TV show. And hopefully that's not what we're doing.
They are definitely going to compress the timeline, and to an extent, I do understand that. But there's some risk with not conveying well how elves age, how much older elves are than people. And I'm worried that, I mean, we were told this was a second age story, but I'm not totally sure that's going to be totally true. I'm not sure there's not going to be bleed over into the third age in what, depending on what they're actually in the trailer. I mean, that's the truth about the trailer is we got a lot of shots that were just a couple of seconds each. There's no story there.
No.
So
and I think the trailer was probably put there. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, DB.
Okay, I think the trailer might have been more of a condensation of everything to grab the broad audience that aren't the deep diving fans of the Second Age, aren't the deep dive storylines that you do have to grab as a studio, be able to grab everyone. And I just hope that it was a broad stroke of what this series is giving us, and not just season one.
Right. What were you about to say, Adam?
Yeah, I was just going to say the condensing of the timelines is a little concerning for me, depending on how it's done. I mean, I know that the Peter Jackson movies did the same in certain parts.
They did.
So, again, going back to the way Peter Jackson pulled this stuff off, it was all done very carefully, very well thought out. So, when Frodo doesn't wait for years and years and years to leave the Shire after Bilbo's party, that kind of condensing works. I'm a little concerned about how much condensing is going to happen here, just because the length of time we're talking about. Kind of like what Andrew said, I don't want to lose the scope and breadth of that story,
Yeah. So I do see someone saying that the latest event that they're doing is the last alliance of elves and men. And I do think they're going to do that story, which is well towards the end of the at the end of the Second Age. But a lot of what they're giving us, I mean, as well as just the creation of the rings at all, means that they're going a significant distance back from that, to the tune of over 1,000 years, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm interested to see what compressing the timeline means. I would almost rather see some of these things told through flashback rather than simply compressing.
They don't have back to tanks. Sorry, Andrew, that won't work.
Dang it.
I would like to point out, however, Elijah Wood is very much like Paul Rudd in their youthfulness. So they could have waited 17 years. They would have looked identical anyways. Doesn't matter. So that would have totally fit.
Sean Astin's not aging that quick either. A little bit here and there, but he's
but Elijah Wood's the right age to play Frodo now. So
that's about right.
Same age.
Right. And if not, you have Daniel Radcliffe.
So since what we got was mostly visual, not much story. I mean, that's everything they've given it. And understandably, it's still 7 months out till we're going to see this thing. What did y'all think about it visually? Adam, I'll let you jump in here first.
So parts of it, I think I'm okay. I think I'm kind of actually a little excited about. Those first shots of, I guess those are Northmen that are kind of walking along one of the ridges. That felt very Fellowship to me.
Yeah,
I like that. However, there are parts of that trailer that honestly felt generic fantasy to me, and that's a little concerning. The Lord of the Rings and even the Hobbit movies have a very distinct feel. It doesn't feel like your average fantasy film. Some of this stuff felt kind of average fantasy. So there were a few scenes that just kind of made me a little hesitant. It didn't feel quite right. But again, this is a first trailer. It's kind of more even of a hype reel than it is a trailer. So
yeah. And eventually, I guess we'll probably get a 2.5, 3 minute trailer, a few months down the road. But I've got a feeling they've shown us all they're going to show us for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, what about you visually?
Visually, it was funny. We were watching Family Story. We watch trailers in bunches, and we all sit down and watch them. So we were watching Doctor Strange.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, and we watch them. We try and watch them once, and then we sort of
Mhm.
give up on trailers because we just try and keep the movie or whatever we're watching. And so I saw the Lord of the Rings come up. This was just a couple of days ago, and it's like, oh, cool, Lord of the Rings. We watched it, and immediately it blew me away. I didn't know the characters I was looking at because I hadn't seen the Vanity Fair article yet, so I didn't know who I was looking. I could have, the blonde hair is like thinking in my mind it was like Galadriel, obviously.
Mhm.
My family, they didn't know who these were. They just saw all this stuff going on. The first image that I saw, I thought it was a Hobbit. That little "We're looking beyond," or whatever that quote is, and then you see the close up looks like a Hobbit, I would think, and
Yeah.
then they move away from that, and then you see these characters with the antlers in the back, and uh, the statue that reminds me of the statue at the end of Lord of the Rings, where the two big stone statues there. I don't know what they're called, but I completely bought the settings. It looked really like something like, wow, this is. I could tell where the money had gone, and it looked a good blend of CGI, but also real sets, and it reminded me of some of the Shire bits. And so when I saw the end of it, it's like, oh, wow, this looks really cool. But like I said, I didn't have any context for the characters, and then I went and searched up the Vanity Fair article, and then it's like, oh, okay, so that was Elrond. Oh, that's a great casting, and Galadriel. And so I started scrolling down through the other things, and like, so okay, well, oh. Now, and I'll say this at this point, it's like, I thought dwarven women had beards. That was I was expecting. I mean, that was my first thought. Okay, I guess that's something different. Okay.
Now, real quick though, I do think I saw where somebody had lightened that photo up, and she does indeed have facial hair.
Does she? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought
okay.
I saw in one picture. I thought I saw almost like some sideburn type things happening.
Yeah, I mean
there.
it's a beard. It comes all the way down,
Yeah.
but it's finer than the male dwarves, and I'm okay with that. The fact that they
Okay.
did it at all makes me happy.
And that's only based on the movies. I mean, it's like, if
Well,
that's
Tolkien did write, and I forget where that comes up. I think that might be even in one of the appendices that they do look like the men.
okay.
The beard thing could have been a little bit of a PJ Liberty, but they are supposed to look like the men.
So I mean, and so apart from that, so whatever the story part is, like that was the only thing that jumped out at me. It's like then I thought to think back to the trailer. Okay, well that was the only standout piece that I saw that really was the only thing that I sort of changed my view from what I was expecting. The rest of the characters look interesting. I don't know if they existed or not in the actual stories, but overall, for me, it was like I can't wait to see this.
Yeah, I think we've got a fair blend of created and original Tolkien characters in that trailer. We know we've got of all. I mean, they dropped 23 posters originally, and I think 5 of them were created characters.
I'll be honest, that concerns me a little bit too.
No, that definitely concerns me. I mean, that was one of the biggest flaws in The Hobbit.
Tario.
And it wasn't even the character herself; it was the love triangle.
Yeah. And
Right.
reading some of these characters, the guy that's hopelessly lost, or this type of stuff, it feels like maybe this is coming around again.
Yeah, that I am concerned about that, and I talked about that. I dropped a little video earlier this evening, and one of the things, like, you can add characters. I mean, you almost have to create some characters in order to flesh out a story.
And Peter Jackson did that too.
He did,
Right.
But it's all of the named characters, the ones in the appendices. Those are the ones that are important to the history, the story. That's why they're named. And so, like, I think you have to be really careful about overemphasizing created characters and risking having them somehow supplant Tolkien's characters. But DB, what do you think? What did you think visually about the trailer?
My first watch, with no real context over what had been going on, because I had been away from all of the murmurings of what was happening. The first shot of what I believe to be Numenor blew me away. Like, that's the scope and the beauty of that hitting you. The statue that is very familiar to that of men. being there. As it went through, elves with short hair. I don't know. I guess that's okay. I was a little, it's kind of different. That's not how they're really described, but we can go with that. That's minor. The whole what's now been dubbed Meteor Man, that I'm seeing now through the reviews, I'm curious as to where we're going with that.
Yeah.
That's and yes, I mean, obviously we're going to create characters because there's going to be points of the story that cannot be conveyed without fleshing out some characters here and then. I just hope that we're not fleshing out more to tell as a cheap way to tell a story. And I was really blown away, like you had mentioned, where they weren't really given access to the Silmarillion to as source material to use. There's, I think, 245 named characters in the Silmarillion that they could draw from. So not being given that as access was kind of stunning. Which leads me to believe that we are going to be closer to the Third Age with what they're doing. And depending on how it's done, we'll see. If we can if we're going to be as close as I think we are to the Third Age, hopefully they can draw that out and we're not, condensing too much to kind of squash that story along, because there's a lot of good things that happen in the last 20 pages of the Silmarillion, 20, 30 pages of the Silmarillion leading into the Third Age, that they can really draw from as far as storyline from the appendix of each of the books. The appendices has a lot of source material there that can be used. So hopefully, I guess I'm reserved but hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of the things that concerns me about the time compression is not only does it kind of step on the importance of how much time has passed prior, but if we really are going to start off at the end of the Second Age rather than telling the whole story of the Second Age, knowing that, I want this to be a story that we're watching for years. I want this to be amazing, and I want to be watching 10 years from now. I want to be watching season 10 of The Rings of Power. But if you compress this too much, where do you go?
Right.
Like at some point, you run yourself into the problem of having to start retelling the Lord of the Rings stories.
As a casual fan, I didn't know that the Silmarillion wasn't included, which is somewhat concerning, especially if you say that the rights to the movies are back up again. I think, now I'm just spitballing this here, but if we see these two series, let's say the Rings of Power, and then whatever ends up happening aside from this in movies, and you have two completely disparate storylines and showrunners, and you've got two very disjointed paths of Lord of the Rings, or at least the Tolkien world. That doesn't sound like a good thing overall for that storyline. And if the Silmarillion wasn't included in what they purchased or what Amazon purchased for the reasons of, we're going to sell this to someone else so they have access to these characters, that seems like a really unfortunate situation to be in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Real quick, DB brought up the Meteor Man. Adam, what do you think? What do we think about that? It's the weirdest.
Know.
It's the weirdest thing in the trailer. Period.
Fair. Yes.
Yeah.
What is the Meteor Man? I'm sorry.
So there's a shot in that trailer where you get a meteor falling to Earth.
Okay.
Big flaming ball in the sky, and then you see someone reaching a hand out towards this man that's in basically a ball of fire. It looks like, and
all right.
It looks like maybe one of the Harfoots, which is the kind of the proto hobbits that we're going to use in this series. And but I don't know. Like my worry is that they're bringing the wizards into play.
I was gonna say I'm concerned that it's Gandalf.
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly be concerned if it were any of the wizards, given why they show up when they show up.
Mm-hmm.
That they're, we have a very specific reasons why the wizards are sent, and they don't show up till well into the Third Age. So I don't know. I would, if it's the wizards, I would have, even if it's, well, one, they all need to when one of them shows up, they all need to show up in some form or fashion. But I'm a little afraid that they're going to try to squeeze the Astari, the wizards, into this story, and I really don't want them to do that.
No, not this early.
Right. Well, it's another one of those things. It kind of makes you go, I don't know when this story is set. Like, if we're going to see the fort, I'm just scared of over compressing it, because this plays out over a really, really long period of time.
I think it's Radagast.
Or pick.
Sorry.
I mean, in the extended versions of the movies, they do mention, the two that we never really learn of. They were only named in the Silmarillion, and it's one of those that I hope they're not bringing them in to give them a story, which one would be neat, but you're killing the reason why they were coming in the first place, and that's jumping ahead. But this is about the Rings of Power, where it should be the forging of the Rings of Power, where here is after they've already been created and they're being sent to, dispel the masses from joining Sauron and whatnot. Yeah. So I don't want to see overlapping timelines where, you're kind of killing the vibe of Tolkien. This is a very large story. And if we're compressing parts of it and not others, I think you lose the scope of it. You lose the true feel.
Yes, Tom Bombadil.
Now you could, Charles, you could see Tom Bombadil in this.
That would be fantastic. That would make it the best series ever. I can tell you that right now. But I get what your guys are saying, because what you guys are like I said, I'm not. Second Age, Third Age, I've heard the Third Age in the prologue to the movies, but if then you start introducing, like DB was saying, characters or at least storylines that are crossing over, then you're taking what we have as a gold standard of the Lord of the Rings trilogy that Peter Jackson did, and then sort of applying a revisionist history style to what happened there, because if you're bringing them too early here, you're changing that sort of storyline, and you're sort of moving those chains, and that's I can see how that can be really quite annoying for people who really know the story and have invested a lot of time and love into that story. It's from my perspective, it's like, oh, that's a cool story, but like I don't necessarily know all those ins and outs and those details that can make the other ones less of a important goalpost, as it were, for this series to hand off to.
Yeah. So that opening shot, Adam, do you think that is going to be Numenor?
I think so.
Okay. I've seen some speculation that it could be a port in the Grey Havens, but I do think it's Numenor. I think, in them base, they showed us that first image a while back, months back.
Yeah, right.
Well, that image also kind of pointed towards a much earlier time that points to a time. Well, I mean, that image, the two trees are in the background, so that's a time before the first age. So
right.
I
have read that there is prologue in this.
Yeah. And that's what I'm wondering. We could have seen shots. Some of these shots that seem to be throwing the time off could just be prologue or even flashback. Even though we don't have back to tanks. We don't know that they don't have back to tanks, Charles. They might.
That's very true. Very popular. One can hope.
Wait, Rodriguez has directed this one too?
I can't wait for the spins.
The elves spinning with their bows.
Yeah.
The eagles are all tiny.
Shiny eagles.
Actually, no, I am going to say Meteor Man is Gandalf, and he's going to ride the Balrog.
There is a scene where where you see the elves in armor, and there's definitely a battle going on. But there is fire behind them, and I did hear rumor that the Balrogs are going to be in here somewhere. That was.
Oh, I mean, if we do Second Age,
I read.
I could see that.
Yeah, if we do Second Age battles and don't show Balrogs, I'll be really disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Like they should be there.
Yeah.
They were, as well as several other, some giant spiders and a few other things that ought to be around in these battles. So,
Right.
So I mean, we could see Balrogs. We could see was it Ungoliant, the giant spider.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of. I mean, the thing is the sky really is the limit with this story. There's so many cool things they could do. I am like Adam. I am a little afraid of it just kind of becoming a generic fantasy story. I know a lot of
or an action. Sorry, like an action movie with the Lord of the Rings slapped on it.
Right. I think that could easily happen where you get caught up in the wars and you don't get enough of the lore. You know what I'm saying? Like you go and see like Two Towers and Fellowship, and you see Helm's Deep or Pelennor Fields, and you think that that's what Lord of the Rings is about. And so I know what you're saying, where they could easily get lost in that.
Yeah, and it's going to kind of be. Well, one, it's going to depend on how good this first season is, and then how the showrunners react to the fans. So, it's where it goes from there. So,
did you say is there have they already greenlit season 2? Is it like there's
no, they haven't, but they've almost spent too much money on it to not do it.
Okay, all right.
They had this huge upfront cost. I think they were close to $500 million for season 1,
mainly for the rights, I believe.
Well, actually, I think the rights were considered separately from that. Wow. And I think that 500 million, I think where that 500 million is coming from is they built, there was an interview a while back that said, look, the second season is probably not going to cost as much because we had to build all these props.
Right.
So they spent, I don't know how much money they spent building props, but it was a lot. And I do like that. I'm glad they did that. So, because but yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, the money's going on screen. I mean, I love the way that what we saw looks. I mean, there's a couple of things that I was unsure about mostly because I don't know where they're going with it, not because it looks bad.
I'll tell you what, I'm just looking through some stuff here. It says that Amazon actually has given this a multi-season commitment. Don't know how many seasons, but they're looking to start filming for season 2 in mid of this year.
Okay. Yeah, they've spent too much money to not try to make a long running thing out of it. So, and to get it out because it takes so long to film this stuff, they almost like that. I mean, what Adam just read pretty much confirms that. I mean, they've got to start filming season 2 before the first season airs.
Yeah.
In order to get the second season out on time.
Yeah, the pre-productions is actually expected to begin the second quarter of this year, taking place concurrently with post-production for this season. And then they're expected to film around the middle of the year.
Okay.
So what you're saying is that they're not going to go to the Stranger Things?
Jedi-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to let these.
That's what I heard as well.
Any kids
originally
be 30
slated
by
for
the time
5 seasons.
Yeah, they're all in rehab in this next season, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like the high school kids are applying for AARP by the time.
There's nothing wrong with AARP.
I didn't say there was. I just said I'm just implying that Stranger Things has taken a long time.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
All right. So as far as known characters that we see, I mean, we've got a couple of big ones. I think the one that has kind of had the most, there's kind of been the most blow up around is Galadriel. I mean, what did y'all think about what? I mean, we don't know anything really. You know, they kind of told us, you know, she's a warrior, and that doesn't necessarily conflict. She didn't have a lot to do with warriors in the Second Age.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where she's not supposed to have had much to do with wars, but then depending on which notes you read, maybe she did.
Yeah. So it's I'm interested in that though. I don't hate it. I don't hate the idea of her being a warrior. I don't need to see her be that for the whole series though.
It kind of goes back to Arwen for me. You know,
right.
That whole idea of making her the warrior elf and that type of thing. And I think it worked so much better the way that they did go with it. So hopefully this whole warrior Galadriel armor thing is you know, kind of a small part of this. So.
Yeah. Well, I guess my concern with it is, you know, the only thing about Arwen, I mean, the stuff they did with Arwen ends up working. Like it works fine. It works with the story, but you did cut a big character out in Glorfindel.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we come back and we know we've got Gil-galad and Elrond in this, who are extreme. I mean, they're extremely important people. I mean, you've got basically the current ruler of the elves and the future ruler of the elves both here.
Right.
I'm a little concerned that, and you know, they kind of indicate that she feels like, you know, evil is already right there on the doorstep. And I mean, that's really kind of Gil-galad that's the one that's kind of knows that something bad's coming. That doesn't mean that won't still be the case. But we also know that, you know, leading those armies was largely Elrond. I'm a little worried that they might just take part of who those two characters are and just give it all to Galadriel.
Right.
And I don't think they have to do that to make Galadriel a strong character. I think she already is a really strong character.
When I saw Galadriel, which I identified as Galadriel after I saw the posters and seeing her in that armor, I saw her as a so correct me, like how much time has happened between the Second and Third Age for the character progression? Yeah, like what you're just showing right now, Jedi of Chicago. He's saying exactly. Is that you get that sense of Galadriel being this extremely powerful character when she is presented with the ring and she turns into that green sort of monster and don't tempt me with the ring. You see what she could have been or what she can be. And if that power or that intensity of character comes from 1,000 years before, it sort of makes sense that maybe being more young, she's learned to mature and sort of control that or be more in control of what that part is.
Yeah.
But again, that's just from my perspective of like, okay, well, based on the movies, it's like, oh, well, she was younger and, you know, sort of more upfront with it, with her strength and, you know, being
and that's where this compression of time thing's either going to be a blessing or a curse.
Yeah.
And I don't know which. I mean, you know, the Second Age alone is roughly 3,400 years. And Galadriel's should be like 5,000 years old at this point.
Yeah, roughly.
Wow.
So, I mean, Elrond is the young one. Elrond is still less than 100 years old at the beginning of the Second Age.
Yes.
But, you know, like Galadriel, kind of, I don't want them to make her too childish, too impulsive, because she's not young. She's very experienced and very wise. And
during the War of the Ring, she's 8,300 years old. Now they're saying that this is thousands of years before that. So she should still be, you know, like 5,000-6,000 roughly. Right.
Yeah.
So legal drinking age, basically.
Yeah. She's all right. She's good to go. She can have a pint.
Little pints now. I gotta get me one.
What about you, DD, on the Galadriel stuff? How are you feeling about that?
I listened to your audio before I came on, and I feel the same way. I'm hoping that they don't take it as this is the perfect part to make a female lead take over, and not that there's anything wrong with that, and not that you can't do that,
Well,
but not at
that's
the
the thing is
expense of
she should play a huge role in all of this. I mean, she should be an
absolutely,
insanely
absolutely.
important character, whether they give her
Right.
this warrior role or not.
But don't take where others were also heavily involved in this situation and take what they did and give to her as well, and take away from other characters, because you can have there's well, Gil-galad especially. He's the head honcho. He's also another one. He holds one of the rings of power. That he's very huge in this, and I'm hoping they're not going to take away from him to give more to Galadriel, because she has enough to do as it is. She's going to be a strong female lead in this regardless. I just don't want to see that we're taking some other storylines and adding to her just because.
Yeah. What about, let's see, who else? What do we think? I mean, we didn't see a whole lot of Elrond, but we get a couple of good shots of Elrond. We see Elrond and what I think a lot of people are assuming is Khazad-dûm. I mean, we get some good shots. What do y'all think about the look for Elrond?
I think it tracks. Not bad. He is much younger. So I think they did a decent job of casting in order to fit him in with the new set, with the Lord of the Rings movies, as far as that's concerned, for continuity. I'm happy with it so far.
Yeah, it didn't bother me.
Charles?
Yeah, when I understood his age difference and the look of the actor, was phenomenal, and he has that younger look to him, especially compared to some of those shots that we've seen of Galadriel. I think it's really, really good. That's I think those two characters are going to be pretty important in this series. Certainly are in the books in the future, but to nail those two characters the way they have seems like a really great start, at least from the visual aspect of it, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, I know some people there is a tendency on the part of some people to nitpick every little piece, and like I don't want to give up on this series. Like, I still really hope that it's good, and and I don't want to spend my time going, well, his hair is not dark enough. I don't really care that much.
Right.
It's like, I love these stories, and I don't think that someone's hair has to be a certain color for the story to be good.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm far more concerned about what they do with the lore than the look of the individual characters. I think Gil-galad, we get at least one good shot of him. I think he looks amazing. And he's very classic for what those elves are described to look like. And I am excited about that.
Right.
Let's see, who else do we get?
Who do you think those guys or those characters with like the elk?
They were described in the Vanity Fair article as hunters. And I think they're just literally, I don't think they have anything to do with the story. I think we're going to get this big, wide, beautiful shot of New Zealand with these hunters walking down this ridge.
We've already seen them. They're done.
Right. I mean, honestly, we might follow those characters, but I think as far as that, I think they're literally hunters. I know some people, I was watching some, I mean, I'm a hunter. I do this stuff. And when you backpack into the mountains to shoot an elk or a moose, you have to backpack them out. Like, you put that big heavy thing on your back and you hike. And because I saw a lot of reaction channels that clearly don't hunt, and the reaction was like, who are these people with these big wings on their back? Or why do they wear these moose antlers on their back? It's like, it's not their clothes. They're literally packing these animals out of, wherever they've hunted them. But I do wonder, I mean, it's possible that they will be important characters, But I think as far as that big shot, that's literally our introduction to those characters and who they are. I mean,
Well,
it just
it's a visual. I mean, I loved it. I just like
Yeah.
once you pick, you track the fact that they're antlers. I mean, okay, I can figure that part out. But it was like the inclusion of like that. You saw that in the Vanity Fair shot, and I obviously know that the Vanity Fair article is going to follow the trailer for sort of explaining certain important pieces and stuff. But as a visual, it's like, and like you said, how many times have we seen trailers that either completely don't include anything or just have a visual that's has a striking visual interest? For me, that was just like really out there, and I particularly loved it. It was like a great little shot to include in there.
Maybe.
Wow.
It's like they've inserted Bambi into this, but Disney's going to come after them now.
It's over.
We do get, I mean, what did y'all think? I mean, we get the Hobbit like character, and I think they're going with
Harfoots, yeah.
Which is
Yes.
kind of a proto Hobbit. So what did y'all think about that? I mean, we didn't get a lot, but that character did do the voiceover for the trailer. What did y'all think about that character?
I feel like I just got to see more out of where that's what they're doing with that.
I think that's the big thing is I just need to see more. Like,
yeah,
it's hard to judge. Overall, I like the look. I like what we're going for. I like the look. We see Durin. We're going with Durin the Fourth. I don't know if they went with the right Durin or not, but I guess with time compression, it'll be okay as long as we don't have Durin the Third and Durin the Fourth alive at the same time.
Right.
But for if you're not as into the lore, basically Durin and then each successive Durin is not the son of the previous one. It's believed to be the literal reincarnation of the first king of the elves. I mean, first king of the dwarves. So each time you have one that receives the name Durin, they're believed to be the reincarnation of the original king.
Oh, wow. That's pretty important.
Yeah, so you definitely can't have Durin the Third and the Fourth alive at the same time.
I think that's where us that are deep into the lore get to be so reserved about all of these things, because there's meaning behind everything, the names, the languages, there's so much behind it that if you start picking and choosing, you're missing something, and you're blending something that shouldn't be blended, is I think but so far I think that's what it all is like, seeing the like you were saying, proto hobbits. At first it was like, there's no hobbits in this, supposed to be to this time. Oh, okay, yeah, all right, it could be. I can see where you're going. I think it's to bring in, I could be, maybe it's to bring in that audience from the Lord of the Rings and give them some familiarity to what this new show is. And it's how we do it, and that's it. It all boils down to the time and how we're squishing these time frames, and how much we are. And I think we can't draw enough from this teaser trailer, because I really think they were like, here's a little of the beginning, here's a little of the middle, here's a little might be coming, that's could be just a storyboard acted out just for the sake of a teaser trailer, and we're not even going to see it yet.
Right.
So,
but that's the whole thing. Like, they do still have to market this to the casual fan.
Well, and that's
or even the people who've never watched the movies. Like, you've got to market this to those people for it to be successful.
They spent a lot of money on this. They need those people to.
Right.
And I just got an email that my Prime subscription price is going up in May.
Oh, isn't that nice? I got that too.
Yeah, $2.
Sure, emailed on that one.
So thanks.
But that, for me, I think where they place the Hobbit or the Proto Hobbit, whatever you guys are calling it, is key, because you see it at the start. Well, after my favorite elf people, but they you see this Hobbit, and that's for the casual fan, or let's say my wife who's watched the Lord of the Rings and loved them. Oh, it's a Hobbit. Cool. Oh, it's the Hobbits. It's where and then for the rest of the trailer, you don't see them again.
It's that Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah. So, but then you move on from that. And I think there's an expectation for okay, it's the Lord of the Rings. Oh, cool. It's the Hobbits. But then you see so much more after it. And I think that's a pretty critical part of the trailer is that, yes, this is where we're coming from, but this is where we're going, or well, in this case, in the past. And that's, I think helps set up for the casual fan is that there's so much more before the Hobbits. And that's part of that reason I think of it, because I saw it and I immediately connected with it and the curly hair and the whole bit. But then you see all this other cool stuff in the end. It's like, wow, there wasn't a Hobbit after that little start. And then, like you said, Andrew, it was a sort of voiceover, almost like Galadriel did in the prologue for the Lord of the Rings. So you're setting up the story, but the story doesn't necessarily include the Hobbits.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't mind at all that they're including those characters, you know, the Harfoots. I mean, they're interesting. They're more nomadic than the Hobbits. And they, you know, in Tolkien's lore, I don't know if they'll do this here, but they interacted with the dwarves a lot. There's, you know, there's some cool stuff they could do there. But Amanda, to answer your question, Thorin is the king of Durin's folk. I'm not 100% sure if he's directly descended from Durin the Fourth or not. I believe so, but I'm not 100% on that. So anything else, you know, that stands out in the trailer, either good or bad? Like, you know, what are you excited about? What are you not excited about from what we have seen?
I'm excited just to get right back into the world. It's when the movies came out, I felt like I have somebody to talk to about this stuff because not many people really dive into the books, especially as young as I did. I could probably count my friends on one hand, maybe one finger that, you know, read Tolkien at an early age, you know, that I could talk about lore with. And when movies came out, it was, you know, like everybody I knew was like, oh, it's such a great thing, it's such a great thing. And now the trailer came out and they're like, oh, this was going on, you know, over here while they were doing that over here with no, that's not what that is. So I'm curious to see, like, I know that I'm pretty sure the next actual trailer we'll see will could probably give us a little bit of, you know, of a little kick to being like, this happened beforehand. Let's just get that out of the way. That this was before the Lord of the Rings, because I've seen a lot of that so far, to where it's, you know, now this is a completely different age. That the one ring that you saw, this is back, and there's more than one ring, and this, you know, this is more of a tale of leading to the Battle of the Five Armies and the Battle of Helm's Deep. This is way before that. You know, this is what turned Sauron into a spirit, you know, that he lost his physical form, you know, that he was a fair looking person that could get by to some as an elf and teach them how to make a ring that he would eventually use against them. So I'm happy that we're going back into that, because it was fun to actually talk to other people about, you know, something that I enjoyed. I just hope that I can continue to do so.
I'll kind of piggyback off of what DB said there, because I think what I'm most excited about, and it's kind of a cop out on this question because it's not really what's in the trailer, it's kind of what it's leading towards. Mm-hmm. You know, it kind of, for me, implies that this is a Sauron story, and
yeah.
You know, we see that type of stuff. It gets dark like that. That could be extremely interesting, you know, when they get into that type of stuff. So I think that's really what I'm excited to see. You know, if Sauron makes an appearance here in this season, or if it's maybe a later thing, I don't know. But that's what I'm excited for, is getting that Rings of Power story, that one ring forging, that type of stuff. So,
well, I think, you know, that's what we never got. I mean, we understand that there's darkness and light in the original trilogy, but we don't really understand where the darkness came from. And this is the chance to tell it. This is the chance to show that and really give a deeper understanding to that darkness from the Lord of the Rings films. And so that is an intriguing thought. Charles, what about you?
Well, I'll give credit to Adam and Josh for sharing the making of the title sequence, because I hadn't seen that, and they posted.
Oh, wasn't that cool?
I mean, so I heard the hubbub about it, and I meant to go and take a look at it, but then they posted it in their Facebook group, and I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh! I even showed the family again how cool that was, and it was a practical effect of making that title.
Yeah.
And then when I watched it, and then I saw the Ring of Power, I was like thinking, it immediately struck me as, again, I flash back to the start of the Lord of the Rings, and again, as a casual fan, it's like you see the 9 kings with, and they're standing in that sort of V-shaped, and there's one ring to rule them all. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these are the 9 rings. These are rings of power we're talking about. And boom, I honestly was sold at that point, just because we're going to get the backstory to this entire point that we saw at the end of Return of the King, and I was sold at that point. And like I said, the trailer for me did nothing to detract from that excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that name reveal blew my mind. When I saw that was I had no reason to think that was a practical.
Yeah.
No, I didn't think it was practical.
So
until
I
saw
was
the
like,
making
all right,
of
this
it.
is extremely CGI'd. and then I saw that video, and I'm like, no way, this isn't real.
And that it spoke to the practical side of what we saw in the Peter Jackson movies, and building the Shire the year before. And I'll never forget that, seeing those stills that my students showed me. So yeah, they built this the year before they started filming to get the grass growing and have nice long strands of grass. And it's like, wow, that's some dedication, and we should be in for a nice treat if they're taking that much attention to detail to make the story authentic. And that's hopefully what I see coming here.
Yeah,
I do hope that's the case. This I'll be honest, the trailer and the Vanity Fair article has filled me with more concern than I had before that stuff came along. And mostly from the stuff that we've talked about, and some of the attention to detail, the lore, that type of thing. Like Andrew said, I haven't given up on this. I'm still going to watch it, but I have concerns. So,
yeah, I mean, you could get a host of things here. You could get something. You could just get something that's just bad, generic fantasy. You could get something that is just pure Tolkien on screen. Or you could get a really amazing fantasy story that's just not recognizable for what it's supposed to be.
Right.
All those things are possible here. And one way or the other, I hope it's really good. And the thing that I like about it's things like this. It's like the movies that came before it. It drove so many new people into the books.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, I hope that they see something that the lore is interesting enough that people go, you know what, I want to read these books, and I want to go beyond the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and I want to read the Lost Tales or the Unfinished
and
Tales.
They pick up the Silmarillion and they quit.
Right. Yeah. And I was very serious about the way I said to read the Silmarillion at the beginning of this.
And I said in chat that was a great recommendation. Kind of read it like a chapter at a time, or sprinkle it in with other stuff.
Absolutely.
It's hard to plow through.
It's like reading the Old Testament.
Yeah, but it is.
I mean, that's essentially
exactly
what it is.
It's reading a Bible. Yeah. It's exactly what it is.
And so I pick it up. I read one of the stories or chapters, and then I put it on the shelf, and I may not pick it up for weeks. And I really think that's the best way to read it. It's not meant to be digested as one single story.
Right.
But I do have reservations.
There's too much to digest this one story.
No, there absolutely.
I mean, you cover hundreds of years in some chapters. It's like, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Now, the one thing that did make me really happy in the Vanity Fair article is, I mean, most of it just didn't mean anything to me. Didn't make me excited. It didn't necessarily do anything to turn me off from it, other than, I'm still mixed on the created characters.
That's what worried me the most from the article.
The thing that makes me the happiest is we had all those rumors last year that this was going to be Game of Thrones round 2 for sex and violence,
nudity, and all, right,
and all of that, and there were credible. It wasn't just made up on the spot to drive clicks.
Right.
Rumors. There was credible information out there that seemed to indicate something else was going on, and I was really, really glad to hear that their end goal for this was it to be family friendly. That
I think I think I saw somewhere a 14 and under rating, 14
well,
rating, something like
they
that.
were
Like
maybe so, but they
kind of like a PG-13.
Right.
Yeah.
In that article, they said that, we want the 12, 13, 14-year-olds to be to watch it.
Right,
Even if it gets a little too, even if they have to pull the blanket up over their head because it gets scary sometimes.
Right.
And that's awesome.
Right.
Like that's amazing. Like that's what we wanted. We
Yep.
didn't want it to be too PG because this era is not. But we also don't want Tolkien to be sex and violence because that's also not what it is.
Yeah, the stories have so much in them that you don't have to rely on that stuff to make it interesting.
Right.
Yep.
Now, I say that makes me happy. If that's what they're really doing, it makes me happy. I'm well aware that there are people out there that think that some of that stuff is that some level of that stuff is completely appropriate for 12-year-olds. So, and you don't have to look further than, a lot of like young adult novels and stuff to see that. But I'm hoping that they're true to what they're saying there and that this is really going to be a PG-13 kind of show.
Yeah.
It should be.
Yeah, no, I think that's the right place for it. I think that gives you the ability to show the battles and have them mean something and have impact and have these scary moments, have scary characters that are legitimately scary when they need to be. But they're not scary because of blood and guts. They're just scary because they're scary.
Yeah, just like the original, like the trilogy that
right.
Did. I mean, there's some pretty intense moments in there, which is fantastic, but it's intense, but that's all it is.
Yeah. But overall, I'm excited. I'm still excited despite having reservations, and I'm doing my best to stay excited about it. I want to be excited about it. I want to talk about it. And like I said, I hope this is something that I can talk about for years on my podcast.
Definitely.
Anybody have any final thoughts before we wrap up for the night?
No.
All right.
I think we touched on it all.
We did. We covered a lot of stuff. I do agree with you here, Jedi of Chicago. It was always, we won't bring us the next Game of Thrones. That was the line. That's what all the studios want, is the next Game of Thrones.
In terms of popularity, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a term of what that meant. And I do think when Jeff Bezos said, bring me the next Game of Thrones, what he meant was the next cultural phenomenon.
However, aside from that, there were legitimate reports of the stuff that you mentioned, the violence and the nudity and the
well,
sex.
yeah, I mean that they were clearing that some of the actors were fine with appearing nude before they were hired. There was report of I don't even remember intimacy consultants and things like that that were credible. I mean, those were credible reports that those things were happening.
Yeah.
So whether that was really happening and it just didn't mean as much as we thought it did, or whether they backed down from it. I mean, we know this thing has kind of gone through several rewrites before the cameras actually rolled. In fact, actually, I think it went through one full rewrite after the cameras initially rolled. So
yes.
So there's a lot going on, but I do want this. My hope is that this is something that will be absolutely amazing, true to Tolkien, something that would have made the man happy. That's what I want to see.
Yeah,
I agree.
Definitely.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, we'll go around the room and let everybody share where your podcast can be found, where people can find you online. So, DB, I'll let you kick that off.
You can find me, ATSW The Escape Pod on YouTube. You can visit us at biolink.com /ATSW The Escape Pod. You can find me, Dragon_Buddy on Instagram and Dragon_Bud with 2 Ds on Twitter.
All right. And Adam?
Yeah, you can find my podcast I do with my co-host and friend Josh. That's From a Certain Point of View. You can find that best place is the website facpov.com. You can also find my Disney blog that I'm gearing back up, and that's Ears Gone By, and that's earsgoneby.blog.
Awesome. And Charles?
Pat's not here. I have no idea where we are. No, just kidding. We are on Twitter at Swations. We're
maybe he is there and he just can't reach the camera.
He's been here the whole time. What do you want?
You didn't even let him talk about halflings.
Well, You've got a great beard.
The broke Charles.
We're out there on podcasts and stuff.
Sorry, Charles, I stepped all over that.
So hard. Yeah.
Stepped all over it with the little Pat Hobbit feet.
Yeah, that's conversations.com. Part of the Red 5 Network. Proud members. Absolutely proud members. Red 5 Network. So, yes. I'll email you something later. I don't know.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. Huge thanks to everybody that was in the chat tonight. Thank you, as always, for joining us and chatting with us over here in the chat and helping us through the conversation. You can find me running the Twitter account for this show at @sci_fictionary. You can drop us a line at theScienceFictionary@gmail.com. And as always, you can find my podcast, everybody else here's podcast, as well as the rest of the Red 5 podcast family at Red 5 Network on Twitter. And until next time, may the force be with you.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.